Professor Dr. Amit Hajela is an architect and urban designer involved in professional practice, academics, and research since the last 30 years. He is a fellow of the Indian Institute of Architects and fellow and founding member of Institute of Urban Designers, India. He's an expert member on Smart Cities program, CITIIS, and jury member for various design competitions and awards. The core area of his work are in the areas of urban design, campus design, and planning, institutional buildings for higher education with high-end AV integration, healthcare facility, planning, corporate offices, interiors with focus on sustainable design and green campuses. Some of his notable works include Comprehensive Master Plan and Buildings for University of Allahabad, Jamia Hamdard University, New Delhi, LIC Divisional Office Complex, Allahabad, and Center for Performing Arts, Patiala. At present, he is visiting professor at School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, adjunct professor, Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, and director, College of Architecture at Vastukala Academy, and GGS Indraprastha University, New Delhi, having made a significant contribution to the undergrad, graduate, and doctoral programs as an expert, external expert, and board of studies member. He has several publications at national and international level to his credit, besides having delivered keynote lectures at national forum. We welcome you, sir, with good heart. Now, I think without wasting time, I really like to hand it over to you. So we can't see you. If you can just put yourself on the video mode. It's a request, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Kanika, for your kind words. It's a pleasure to be part of this faculty development program, and I'm grateful to APJ Institute of Technology, Professor Vivek Sabharwal, and all the organizing team for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you today afternoon. And of course, you have been hearing lots of stalwarts in the profession and the academics who have shared their experiences of academics and profession with you so far. I would probably like to carry forward what was already being debated, and rather like to avoid duplication of some of those. Nevertheless, the focus of my discussion with you, which I want to share, is part of the research which I have been involved with for last almost 2 decades. This started after I was put to work out the accreditation document for the Council of Architecture by the former President, Professor P.R. Mehta. And that was to align the accreditation for architecture institutions at par with the inspection module of architectural institutions to avoid too many inspections which used to happen during that time. However, it went on and we created a document for accreditation, but unfortunately it didn't carry forward after 2005 with the change in leadership. And I hope, I think now the time is ripe that we keep talking about accreditation as a very important instrument of delivering quality in architectural education, which is the focus of the National Education Policy 2020. And so I like to share my screen, and then I like to go ahead with you on this subject. So is my screen visible?
Not yet, sir. Nothing has been shared.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Just a moment. Right.
So right in the center, there is a green color tab. Yeah, great. It's come.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So see, the subject of the conference is to look at the outcome-based education. But here, I would like to now take a different position on the entire subject, where I think the process is more important than the product. And that's more important in any kind of a system or an organized sector delivering some kind of the services to the stakeholders. And here, I would like to mention that the stakeholders for us are the students, which are the fundamental stakeholders, and then they are also the faculty members and the entire human resource, which is supporting the education system per se. So the subject of my discussion with you today is an approach towards total quality in architectural education. And this is being seen from the lens of a management perspective. And this falls within the domain of the management approaches which are being followed for the service sector. And how do we achieve total quality in the architectural education, which is the need of the hour and also has been debated intensely as part of the national education policy. Now, architectural education per se is a product, a service, and a lifelong objective brought and paid for as a pathway for opportunity committed towards well-being of society through creation of built environments. Now, before I go ahead, it's important that we just go back to history as to how architectural education started in India. Of course, we had the old system of education which started through gurukuls, and then we had madrasas. But the formal system of the university system, so to say, began in India in 1857 in the cities of Calcutta, Madras, and Mumbai, which initially were the presidency colleges, and then they were converted into universities. The formal education in architecture started with the JJ School in 1912, and subsequently we had several schools which came up before independence, and then subsequently we also had institutions which came post-independence. Now, going ahead with this, we recognize that the jump in the education sector has been substantial post 1980s, when we saw that the private institutions came up onto the scene of architectural education, and this got further impetus after 1991 when the economy opened up following the LPG policy of the government of India. So far, with all this, there has been tremendous transformation in the system of education and architectural education. And something which has been bothering us for so long has been the fact that we got the minimum standards of architectural education way back in 1989. And it was only after 37 years, roughly, that we got the revised standards of architectural education in the country in the year 2020. So I think there has been a huge gap from 1989 onwards to approximately, in fact, 83. The first started with 83 and then got revised in the middle. But then that's the kind of scenario that we are in today. The fact is that the building industry in India is growing with the current impetus of the government of India and the focus being given to the urban infrastructure projects and the larger infrastructure in the housing sector and so on. And today, the building sector or the building industry approximately is valued around 126 billion US dollars and is about 8% of the India's GDP. So we see that over a period of time that there is going to be an increasing demand, but how do we address this demand and supply equation in the times to come will be very critical to the future of the profession and to the future of education. So I think it's important and paramount that we continue to be competitive globally and we offer education which is relevant in times, which addresses the needs of the students, the service providers, which are the institutions, and ultimately the interest of the country is being looked at large. If we analyze the curricular structure and the minimum standards of architectural education, I think right from the beginning, we had the demand of looking at the kind of numbers or the quantities, so to say, in terms of the demand and supply equation that we had in the country, and particularly post-independence, the need and demand for infrastructure has been growing. And therefore, we focused on to the issue of quantity substantially because our demographics were like that. And then there were also aspirations of a young nation which got independent about 70, 72 years ago. So we had a new aspiration to look forward to, and architecture and the built environment becomes a very important instrument of fulfilling that aspiration. Now, of course, the impetus on technology came through Pandit Nehru's vision for India, and that is how we took forward architecture education also. And but principally, the entire instrument became more qualified and formal after the Council of Architecture came into being, following the Architects Act 1972. Now, India has had a rich tradition of imparting education, starting from 5th century, and it continues to go on. And then, if we look at the timelines, the institutions came in different decades, and parallelly, a lot of the ideologies and visions of these institutions were also derived by the way architecture was progressing professionally. So we see that in this there has been a transformation in the architectural thoughts, and the way we have been conducting education and probably delivering it in the profession. Uh, the other parallel things that happened were that several bodies of the government of India and maybe the autonomous bodies also came up, and during the different timelines, we see different statutory bodies and professional bodies coming in together, bodies of the government of India, which found reasonable lateral integration to the discipline of architecture, and each of them now contributing holistically. So basically, we have come to a situation where we are looking at architecture as a collaborative platform. And I think this is the trend across the globe, where people are looking about collaborations, people are looking about transcending the boundaries of discipline, and probably different disciplines and each specialization informing the other. And this probably is the intention also, which has been enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals to provide economic sustainability, social sustainability, and also environmental sustainability. Now, if you look at the trends that we have seen over the years, that in the year 2018-19, we had something like 477 colleges in India. And at the same time, the paradox is that these architects who registered in 2017 with the council were about 9,629, and the ones registered in 2018 were about 13,912. Vis-a-vis the approximate number of seats, which were about 25,000 graduating students every year. And from that standpoint, I think we can see there's a paradigm shift in the approach being taken towards the profession, and the number of architects who are actually entering into formal practice of architecture, or they may choose not to register and deliver professional services by and large. So approximately about 1/3 or maybe 50% architects registered in the year 2018. That means there's a sizable component of graduating students who either work in offices or they work for the government sector. And there is a certain trend that we see that the students now who graduate prefer to have a little more secured environment. And of course, the issues of profession and the kind of salary structure that we command and that we offer has some very important pointers to mark. And that also is a very important reason for the general decline in the takers for architectural education. And probably lies a great opportunity that we need to look at it with a fresh mindset. And we need to see that how students are being provided that opportunity to gainfully enter the profession and contribute to the requirement of the nation by and large. Now, this current status of 25,000 intake transcends into almost about 125,000 students enrolled in about 5 years, which means that we would have a demand of 12,500 trained faculty members in across the country. Now, the Council of Architecture of late came up with the Perspective Plan 2020, where they have tried to stratify the opportunities and also the demand and supply of new colleges for architectural education across the country. And they have put and stratified the country into 6 segments, and different regions have been identified where there is absolute demand and where new colleges are required to make the subject or discipline of architecture available to the students and aspirants of those states which are deficient in colleges as of now. And it goes down to the extent that where the regions may not be considered, where they have excess of architectural education institutions providing architectural education to be curtailed for some time. Now, if we go along, we see that there has been a structured process which has been pursued by the government of India. And the focus of the architectural education in the country always was oriented toward producing trained manpower which were geared to take on the profession. That was the focus. And that also can be implied and can be reviewed from the minimum standards of architectural education which have been prescribed, where the focus is on providing architectural education for the profession, and which probably is to some extent reasonable to assume because of the requirements that the country has and with the growing population in the government. However, we understand and we recognize the fact that India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and it was about 5th fastest growing economy in 2020, which has slipped to 7th position now because of the COVID pandemic that we have been part of in the last 1 year. But we see that there was a very firm policy that the government followed through these various commissions which were being established by the government of India. And we see that there has been an evolution in the education, and each policy had something to offer. And they particularly were looking at both the elementary education and the higher education. But of late, the understanding that we have is that the recognition of Indian universities across the globe and their global competitiveness is a matter of concern, where our universities don't even figure into top 200 universities in the world. And the government of India has been looking at it very seriously, and it was as early as the 11th plan and even the 10th plan when the National Knowledge Commission 2006 was established by Dr. Manmohan Singh, and which gave a series of guidelines to ensure that there is a renewed approach to look at education holistically. And then the 12th plan very clearly mentioned the issue of quality, which was missing. And so far, as I said earlier, that our engagement with quantity has prevented us to deliver quality. So today, what I thought that I would like to put forth some of those ideas on qualities and how quality can be absorbed as part of architectural education, seeing it through the lens of management. And this also echoes with the kind of policies which have been laid out as part of the national education policy. Now, I think the major shift came in 1986 when there was a push towards digital technologies which were being used, and the curriculum was also being modernized substantially. But now, of course, the idea way back in 86 did mention that while we look at technology and integrate technology, but they should be rooted in the Indian culture. And all that learning that is being provided should translate into lifelong learning. Now, the vision that we see as part of the National Education Policy 2020 is to provide an education system that contributes to an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high quality education to all. Now, please mind the word high quality. The second aspect of it is develop a deep sense of respect towards constitutional values, bonding with one's country, and a conscious awareness of one's role and responsibilities in the changing world. The third important aspect is instill skills, values, and dispositions that support responsible commitment to human rights, sustainable development, and living a global well-being, and thereby reflecting a true global citizenship. Now, this is something which is very important, that we are now creating this manpower in this young nation, which are at par with the global standards, and that's how it works. There have been a lot of attempts across the globe, which we see that way back in the year 2008, we saw the Bologna process being pursued in the European Union. And that's where the 46 nations across Europe came together to create a common platform and to standardize the education system in the European Union. This was fundamentally to look at the objectives of quality, creating parity, enhancing mobility of students to actually shop for knowledge in the best of institutions they would like to pursue. They offered an array of electives and allied courses which could resonate with the curricular structure, and at the same time standardize and internationalize the approach to education. Now, if I were to summarize the objectives of the national education policy, it lays emphasis on quality of education and research. All professional councils are now supposed to be subsumed into a higher education regulatory authority, except medicine and law. Professional education will be an integral part of higher education, which again has been well recognized, and it aims to transform the curriculum and pedagogy by the year 2022. The objective of the national education policy is also to foster quality education, which is dependent on the quality of teachers imparting knowledge. The next dimension which has been covered is the rigorous teacher preparation in vibrant multidisciplinary institutions. That means the focus is to establish multidisciplinary institutions, and of course they have laid out a clear pathway where a lot of these institutions will become part of a larger body of collaborating institutions to be part of one singular entity. At the same time, the focus is again on integrating technology at all levels of education, and the flexibility that also Professor Desai was talking about, that the system has to provide a reasonable flexibility to pursue education, both at the level of the choice of the stakeholder and also within the system imparting education, which is connected to the ideas of affordability of students and the credit retention facility through DigiLocker system. Now, these ideas don't seem to be, are not very new. I think the idea of the option to pick up courses as per the affordability was echoed as early as 1912 by Henry, who was the first proponent of architectural education in India through the J.J. School of Art and then subsequently J.J. School of Architecture. Now the other emphasis which is significant for our consumption is the integration of liberal arts and vocational education, which seem to be quite relevant in terms of the atelier approach that we follow for architecture also. And a lot of initial institutions followed an atelier approach for architectural education. But at the same time, we are looking towards some very vibrant multidisciplinary institutions which bring on the platform different specializations which can be looked into. Now, to summarize these discussion, I think the important dimensions and the gaps that we see in the current education system starts with the admission process. Admission process certainly is very critical. And I think it's a matter of research that the system, because of the demographics that we have in the country, we ultimately follow an elimination process. And that is done through the process that is being followed through these series of entrance exams and then these other exams like NATA and then at the other levels of CAT and JE and whatever you may like to call it, is basically to select a few depending on our resources and the number of seats that we are able to offer, but ultimately it translates into an elimination process per se. But the fact is that what is a matter of great inquiry is that the performance of the student at the time of selection needs to be correlated with his performance in his subsequent 5 years. And this is something very important, and which puts in a rider as to how the examination or the entrance process or selection of students and the criteria for selection of students had to be structured and worked out. Now, this is a question which I'm leaving you with, which demands a lot of debate, and probably this could be one full subject of discussion at some point in time. The second area is curriculum, and curriculum planning is one of the most critical things in the present times because it's a fulcrum of education and needs to be reviewed every 10 years. And this review has to be a very rigorous process and a very objective process which has to be undertaken to ensure that the curricula continues to be relevant. And this has direct implication on the quality of graduates who pass from our institutions. Now, there was a very interesting NASSCOM report which came in 2017 and was rather alarming, that the total number of employable graduates in the country, which included both IITs, IIMs, AIMS, and all best of institutions in the country, only produced 17% students who were employable. Now, this is a very, very serious concern, that we are unable to produce employable graduates. That means their understanding and their ability to be part of the profession, which the minimum standards has been talking for several decades, it falls so short that in spite of the focus on producing students who would be ready for the profession and for the real-time engagement, somehow fail to meet the requirement. And this probably is critical to all higher education imparting institutions in the country. This has a bearing not only in terms of the curricular structure, but also on the pedagogy being followed in different institutions. Of course, initially the standards do offer you a flexibility of 25%. It was 75-25. I think now it's been enhanced a little bit more. But they do give you an opportunity of looking and pursuing the vision and philosophy of each institution and the pathway and the ideology that they would like to pursue. See, this is a situation where there is no one size that fits all. Every institution in different region can follow a different pathway, which might be more relevant to the region where they are located and to the local conditions where they can respond to. So I think it's important that we create a pedagogy fundamentally which encourages conceptual understanding and application of theory to practice. That's the takeaway from the issue of the pedagogy which needs to be pursued, and there would be different set of pedagogies that need to be developed for different subjects as per their requirement. Going further, I think it's important to look at the teaching processes. The teaching learning processes should evolve with relation to the ongoing challenges and issues, and should be adaptive to the future requirements, and probably also to be in sync with the times, and accordingly the pedagogical approach may be pursued. Apart from this, the critical aspect is the multidisciplinary approach, which is important, that we find a lot of common areas of engagement, and each discipline now informs each other. And therefore, we need to look at a multidisciplinary approach, and it should be a inbuilt process towards holistic development of our students. Apart from this, I think we live in the era of information technology, where the information has come onto our palms, and therefore there is a change in the outlook and psyche of the students. Now, these need to be taken care of, and I think we need to respond to the changing times and approaches, and the way we engage with our students needs to be worked out, which is very, very critical to the delivery of the professional educational services that we are offering. The gap that we see critically in India, and which is also a reason for the focus on quality, is the way we are looking at research and innovation, particularly in the discipline of architecture. I think research and innovation in architecture still is at a nascent stage, and we need to focus more. And this is also one reason of our low rankings across the globe. But now I think with the focus and the impetus being given, it's important that research should not be looked as an instrument for professional growth by the faculty. Research should become an integral part of taking an informed decision, not only in terms of our studio projects or the exercises, but this as an attitude, if it becomes integral to our understanding, it also is very, very useful from the perspective of delivering good professional outcomes. In case, and it is true that the professional outcomes that we see across the globe are all embedded in substantial research and creating an informed position on the subject of the delivery which is expected from. And I know for sure that offices like Renzo Piano, they actually do a one-to-one scale models for the details that they develop in their office, and it is to that rigor that they take the profession. So probably a lot of introspection needs to be done at different level, and the research I feel is a very important instrument of the educational system and the profession. The other gap that we see is the mismatch between education and practice. I think this is something which needs to be looked into very, very carefully, and the platforms need to be created where we try to engage professionals and we invite them to be part of the education process. They may be brought in, or architectural practices may be brought into studios along with their team to encourage a particular building type where they have an expertise and probably add value to the studio learning as a whole. Not the least, we can't be lagging behind in technology and adaptation of technology. Apart from the above, I think most courses in higher education do talk about values and ethics. And this is something which is critical to architecture also. I think we need to have courses on ethics in architecture, which we seem to be getting diminished over a period of time. Coming further from here, I did talk about standardization earlier, which as we saw in the Bologna process, and we have been also practicing standardization to quite an extent. At the same time, it gives you the flexibility to add on the more dimensions besides establishing the enabling essentials in terms of knowledge that the students must possess in the discipline of architecture, and they may have more informed positions on the allied subjects as may be required, or something more which is connected to the local areas. The last, which is most critical, is internationalization of education. And we see that with a growing economy, we are also looking at the foreign direct investment in education now. And India, with its tradition of imparting education way back from 5th century, there is a great opportunity of creating this as an educational hub, not only for the students in South Asia, but we could be at least begin with to be one of the leaders in the SAARC nations. At the same time, we have the capability to take on with the best of the world, because the intellectual capital that we have in the country is at par with the best in the world. So I think the focus needs to be shifted to ensure that we look at the global perspective and offer opportunities for students across the globe to come, and this demands the kind of education that we impart has that kind of quality which matches with the best in the world. Now I'll go to the, with this background, I'll go to the core issue of the total quality management as an instrument which I've used, and this is also part of one of our ongoing research. And this is something which I shared as part of the Future of Education Conference 2020. It's an international conference held in Malaysia in October 2020. And this was also part of that engagement in that conference. Now, the first aspect is that we have been talking about quality for a very long time, but what quality really means is important. The totality of features and the characteristics of a product or service that bears on its ability to satisfy the stated or implied needs. This was the definition which was given by the British Standards Institution in 1991. And what it translates into is to conformance to requirements, conformance to a standard, assurance of being the best, and consistency of the purpose. So these are fundamental attributes of what quality actually means and what quality delivery means. But now moving ahead from here, that what is total quality? Uh, Total quality refers not only to a product, but also the way product is made as well as presented to the customer. Now, in our case, the customer is the student, or you may call it a stakeholder. So the critical aspect here is the stakeholder orientation, the process orientation, human resource management, because educational institutions are absolutely embedded in the human resource, and then the leadership that drives all the above processes. And now going from and picking up the purpose of its definition, what is as part of the way we talk about it in the management parlance, is that total quality management approach for an organization is centered on quality based on the participation of all its members and aiming at long-term success through customer satisfaction and benefits to all members of the organization and to the society at large. So TQM per se is a people's driven process. It looks into the people's attitude. It looks at the process orientation. And then the focus of TQM is on continuous improvement of the process. So this is a very, very dynamic thing that we offer as part of architectural education. And this is something that we need to recognize, that it is an evolving process. There is nothing absolute in the services, and there is always a room for modification, change, and adaptation. And therefore, in order to pursue continuous improvement, it has to be inbuilt in the processes of imparting education. And this can be achieved by empowering the people involved and the autonomy that they are being given as part of their engagement in the entire educational delivery process. Now, to put it in a nutshell, the continuous improvement plan is an objective which brings in the effort to bring out the best for the stakeholder as well as for the institution. Now, we have a knowledge that we have received from some of the quality gurus, which includes Deeming, Juran, and Philip Crosby. We've talked about various themes of quality, and but their ideas, which I've tried to summarize, echo in these four specific aspects of the quality dimensions, which they have advocated through their theories. The inspection, according to them, is never an answer to quality improvement, and nor is policing. That means any kind of instrument which is embedded in the process of policing will never give you the right kind of results. That means it has to be open and it has to be absorbed by the people who are the stakeholders in the entire process to be more responsible at their own respective levels. Second most important thing is involvement of leadership and top management is essential in necessary culture of commitment to quality. That means it's more of a top-down approach, where the leadership itself is focused towards quality delivery and their commitment to creating a quality culture in their organizations. A program for quality requires organization-wide efforts, long-term commitment, accompanied by necessary investment in training. And I think the session that we are in today is one in that direction, where probably we are looking at achieving quality through the investment being done in the training process through these FDPs. So I think it demands for a lot of commendation to the organizers for at least bringing this to all the people involved in this process of delivering education. And then the most important thing that comes out here is the quality is first, which is most important as in paramount as a parameter, and schedules are second. I mean, we often get to schedules first, but here the focus has to be more on how to achieve quality and what would be the processes of achieving the quality. We also see that other systems which have been followed, which is the Six Sigma principle and Lean Six Sigma model in management. Apart from that, the Ishikawa's model of achieving quality have all been very, very successful, and which also translates into a 100% OK movement in Japan. and is a very, very well practiced concept in the production houses and also in the service sector, which has to be absorbed, and we can look into some of those processes also. Now, to do that, I think the important aspect of the service that is being provided is to measure the quality of service. And how to measure the service quality comes through a service quality model. Now, the important translation of this model, which initially was done for manufacturing processes and also subsequently translated to the service sector industry also, which we are part of, the outcome of this model suggests that universities need to maximize their effort to continuously improve their services and outcome. The universities are obliged to satisfy their students, considering them as their main stakeholders. And then has to be a reliable and valid instrument for measuring service quality of higher education from the student's perspective, which is indispensable. And the critical aspect here is that a holistic approach refers to the consideration of both functional, which is the process part of it, and the technical, which is the outcome part of it, to achieve quality. Now, fundamentally, both holistic and transformative perspective needs to be looked into as critical to the quest of finding appropriate comprehensive model for measuring service quality, particularly in the context of higher education, and to identify quality dimensions, sub-dimensions in higher education, and to test measurement scales for reliability and validity are very, very critical as a continuous process. So, to measure quality as a part of the service quality model, some of the dimensions include the intangibles, which probably is connected to responsiveness, assurance, the tangible delivery, the empathy with the stakeholder, and the reliability of the service provided. Now, translating all this, these dimensions into the architectural education, it basically culminates into the key quality dimensions, which include collaboration, information and responsiveness, the nature of courses offered, campus facilities, teaching practices, teaching learning processes, so to say, evaluation system, both internal and external, computing facilities available these days, the nature of collaborations in and outside the country, and then the comparison of the delivery across the globe, and the post-study of the kind of delivery that we do, besides the kind of resources that we offer and is made available to the students. So service quality as a form of attitude is related but not equivalent to satisfaction, and result from comparison of expectations with perceptions of performance. Now, service quality fundamentally adopts a performance-only approach in operationalizing the quality of service delivery. Now, this was further taken forward, and this translated into a very important conceptual framework, which was through the higher education service quality model. Now, you must be surprised that we've been talking so much about architectural education, and maybe you must have been hearing some very different ways of pursuing and delivery of architectural education. But here, what I'm trying to share with you is that there has been a very, very organized scientific way of looking at the process of delivering education. And that's where the ideas of the service quality and quality delivery becomes very, very critical and paramount. And this is something that we need to engage with as part of our system as a whole if we have to achieve quality. And the idea of this discussion with you is to look at some of the possible approaches as to how the quality can be delivered to the stakeholder, and we are able to fulfill the objectives at large. So the critical aspect of the higher education service quality model looked into the dimension of the administrative quality, which is being pursued by the institution, the physical environment, the core educational quality, that means which is connected to the discipline itself, the kind of supporting facilities which contribute to quality, And the most important departure from where this service, higher education service quality is different, is the transformative quality. Now, the transformative quality has a great bearing on architectural education. See, when we get a student at the first year level, uh, he is at par with probably all the students who seek higher education in the country or across the globe. But professional education in architecture, in particular, we not only transform a student into a professional, but we also transform his attitude to becoming a professional. And in many ways, the architecture education as a structure of the curricula finds its relevance right from first year to the final year, where there is a progression in the growth of a student. And it is also in terms of transforming not only his educational objectives, but also the professional perspective with which the education is being provided. So we also shape his attitude towards the profession and towards professional delivery. So enhancing the student's ability involves adding value in terms of knowledge and skills, but value addition is thus a measure of quality in terms of the educational experience provided to the student. And in order to add this value and the options and the opportunities to the student, it demands empowerment of the participant. That means the participant, both at the level of the students and faculty, are authorized to take and undertake the process which caters to self-transformation and personal growth of each one of them. So this is something that we need to look, and we keep talking about this as part of the higher service higher education service quality model. And the model has a lot of potential for application and testing in various higher education systems across the globe. So if I have to summarize the TQM in higher education, it translates into 7 major attributes and dimensions. One is to increase competition. I mean, the best way to achieve quality is to be competitive. Second is to achieve stakeholder satisfaction. Third is to maintain standards. Fourth is to have a system of accountability inbuilt in the system. That means at all stages of delivery of all the individuals involved in the education delivery process are made accountable. And then also to improve the employee morale and motivation. That means the system has to be a facilitator to ensure that the employee who is being engaged is always motivated to deliver the best. And then this translates into credibility, prestige, and status of the institution. And at the same time, when you achieve this, you certainly enhance your image and visibility globally. Now, coming to specifics to architectural education, the dimensions for architectural education translates into some tangible dimensions. The competence of the people involved, the attitude, the content, the delivery, and the reliability of the system. Now, each one of them has a series of sub-attributes which are very critical to achieving quality and maybe total quality in architectural education. And these have to be looked into very, very carefully because each sub-attribute has a reasonable lateral and vertical connection in terms of delivery. Now, to achieve this, I think there needs to be a paradigm shift in the pedagogy in this age of information technology. And it needs to be consistent with the philosophy of the school. We need to instill the confidence in the stakeholders to make them more employable and also expose them to the opportunities for their personal growth. Integration of definitive and interpretive disciplines to the core subject of architectural design in the curriculum. Now, when I say definitive fields are those fields which are more objective, which probably are more technologically driven fields, and interpretive fields are those which are more subjective fields which we integrate as part of the curriculum, where they are subjected to interpretation and also its own way of integrating it to the education per se. And the curricular structure, of course, now is being mandated, has to support a credit transfer regime with electives being offered from early years. That means with the kind of exit policy now that is being offered, and the student also is being offered to pursue education at different stages by achieving certain credits and receiving and keeping them safe, and then can pursue further at the appropriate time, depending on his economic needs and the affordability of pursuing education. I think this becomes very important that the curricular structure supports that kind of a credit transfer regime. At the same time, offers additional subjects, which also helps the stakeholder to charter his own path for the future. And this has to be done through the engagement and adaptation of the emerging technologies, something that we have learned to negotiate through this pandemic by virtue of using this online medium on which we are interacting today. And probably this is going to transform the entire education system in a very, very big way. But primarily, one sees a great opportunity of the kind of outreach that it offers in terms of the collaborations and exchange of knowledge and also creation of knowledge through these mediums. However, some subjects would have its own set of challenges which will have to be overcome with time. And I'm sure the application of the state-of-the-art technology in the teaching learning processes with the right kind of emphasis on research will help us overcome these barriers. The focus certainly to achieve quality has to be on industry-institution interaction, a continuous self-appraisal method, which is again part of the continuous improvement process that I talked about. And last, that was connected to the issue of values and ethics, is the institutional integrity, which is most important as far as this is concerned. Now, if I was just to compare the total quality parameters to the goals of architectural education, so what we talk in terms of management, which is the cost control issues, translates into time and cost efficiency in the architectural education terms. Quality control translates into quality achievements of the stakeholders. Performance control translates into performance development, which is again a continuous ongoing process. Adaptivity control translates into adaptive flexibility. That means it gives you the right kind of flexibility to achieve the objectives of the education, and it gives you room to evolve with time. Sustainability control translates into sustainable durability. That means it becomes a systemic priority that best practices of design education are being imparted. Information flow control becomes critical to communicative terminologies. That means we have to invest into the use of communicative technologies where the instructor and the receiver both are at the same platform and they can engage using the same terminologies. The security control, which is an important aspect, also translates into some kind of confidential measures which are being pursued, which is inbuilt in our processes of examination and so on, so forth, and also the way the intellectual property rights and the professional knowledge is being shared and is being used. So a good academic program is embedded on a very well qualified vision, philosophy, a policy framework, which is translated into a strategic framework for delivery, an implementation methodology, which is connected to lifelong learning skills. The objective is to be at par with the best in the world, so we have to be globally competitive. And then an integrated approach to architectural education, which integrates the definitive and interpretive fields, informing the core subject of design, structures, and construction. There has to be a systemic progression in the complexity of the problems and the way the progression of the student is being pursued from the first year to the final year. And here I again emphasize that the product is bound to be good if the process is right. And I think I am a firm believer of this, that and it is true, and I'm sure many of my other colleagues who have spoken to you must have talked about the way the outcomes were driven by the process. And I'm sure Professor Ranjana Mittal must have spoken about that how process is critical to the philosophy of School of Planning and Architecture, which has been pursued over decades. And our firm belief over the years has been that as faculty members, we have to guide the students toward the right process. And as long as we are able to guide and make the student undergo the process, the product is bound to be good. In case time permits, I will show you one such demonstration of how the process translated into the product. Now, going to the model that I developed for the total quality for architecture education, the assumption that I'm making that an institutional commitment is available towards achieving quality. And the convictions that I have in this assumption is that the stimulation of students' minds presupposes continuing professional growth of faculty through study of new developments in the areas of technology, science, and through innovative instructions. Research and development-based inputs bring value shift in education. And the fundamental shift which we are looking at from the pedagogical perspective is that the teaching needs to be transformed to learning. Information-centered transformation needs to transform to knowledge-centered engagement. Time served to results. Routine exercises to creative problem-solving exercises. Structured instruction to unstructured interaction. Now, these are very important aspects of the instructional focus that we need to give as part of the framework which we need to pursue and then take it forward. Now, the academic aspirations of the faculty also need to be looked in. So that means they need to be given opportunities of acquiring knowledge, disseminating knowledge, applying knowledge, and creating knowledge. Now, the barriers that we often have to overcome is the issues and the gaps in the vision and mission of the management, complacency and satisfaction levels, sometimes the load and the volume of work which is being loaded. Resource crunch is a very important problem in most institutions. Empowerment of the middle management. I think empowerment is one of the very important components in achieving quality. And sometimes it could also be the fear of empowering people. We are quite skeptical, and now we are also rolled in by cynicism. And then in many areas, the accountability and transparency does not exist. Therefore, the training and development of the core competence of the people involved becomes very, very critical. Now, this should translate into the right kind of faculty selection procedures, which should maybe become maybe a ratio of 1:3:4 as compared to 1:2:4, which provides the flexibility for vertical growth of the faculty. That means I think IITs have set a good example of lateral entry of the faculty being restricted, and they only ensure entry of the faculty at the lowest level, which is at the assistant professor's level, and then you grow to the professor's level by virtue of some of the fixed mandated points that you need to achieve, or the benchmarks you need to achieve. And with that kind of experience that you generate and the academic credibility that you achieve, you have a flexible structure to go vertically up. And there is no stagnation that happens, which was always connected to the conventional policy of the vacancies in the government sector particularly. So here it is the achievement of an individual which becomes more significant in his or her growth as a process. Now, in terms of the student selection systems, of course, it's a more deep-rooted area of inquiry, but fundamentally, as of now, it should translate into the weightages being altered for the various criteria. So the aptitude test certainly should have the base maximum weightage of 50%, supported by the understanding of the basic sciences, which are prescribed by the council to the tune of about 35%, and loading the examining board's score to about 15%. However, the way and the manner in which the entrance exams are being structured need to be looked into very, very carefully. And this demands a lot of innovation in the way we select the students and we test their knowledge and their aptitude for the admission to the discipline of architecture. Apart from that, the aspect also which was being debated about the examination and juries and so on, it is important that there has to be a very structured way in which the examinations and evaluation is being conducted. The fundamental breakup for that as being suggested is about 33% questions which are being given in any examination should be such that the all students should be able to answer. That means that's the kind of first level benchmark that when you examine, and that's the kind of knowledge that is being imparted that student is able to pursue it. The second is that about 34% of questions should be such that all good students will be able to answer, and average students will also be able to answer correctly, but few weak students will not be able to answer correctly, and that's where that certification comes. And then the last set of 33% questions are those which few average students will be able to answer, but most good students will be able to answer, who have pursued their academic engagement very critically. Now, this achievement is quite dependent on the infrastructure resources that we have in our institutions, and needless to say that it demands the latest in the technology of the IT platform, the application of smart classrooms for global outreach, the infrastructure in terms of 3D printing and model making things, digital libraries, creation of media labs, and other living environment which ensures a holistic growth of the students at large. Now, the pedagogical aspects again then become very critical to the process, which I have talked about earlier. And I'll go to the structure of the curricula between the first year to the second year to the final year, which has been worked out as part of this quality pathway for achieving the architectural education. Now, this is aligned to the basics of the minimum standards which have been worked out, but the gaps that we find in the learning processes of the students have been put forth. I think you are able to see this on the screen. It will be difficult in the kind of time frame for me to get into this into absolute detail, but you can see on your screens that what we are trying to talk about is this and how the progression of knowledge is being translated. But here the focus is to bring on the platform as part of integrated studios, which includes the core subject of design, which ensures that the entire system is embedded on the platform of sustainable development, integrating the structures and construction as core courses, and then informing the student to approach design through the set of skills that are being imparted in the initial years, and then subsequently embedded in the design thinking approach as connected to the conventional critical thinking approach. Now, this is something that is important that we need to diversify and then we need to invest into. That and globally, the approach is now to invest into design thinking and to bring that experiential quality of the user for whom we end up designing into the process of design and engaging with design in a more holistic manner. And I think this demands a lot of empathy that is required for the designer to be able to engage with the user. Now, these are all these processes which are connected to the various scales of problems and the way the student gets informed by various subjects as they grow. There's a lot of emphasis on the use of digital application, which is the need, and also simulation techniques that we use. With, of course, the national education policy has been laying a lot of emphasis on coding, and right from early stages. And we hope that the children that we get subsequently will be quite skilled in their knowledge and will have a substantial knowledge base on the information technology side. So I think all this has to be put together, both as part of our teaching learning processes and the methodologies which we absorb and adopt to, which are flexible, and they provide the kind of flexibility to the studio team to evolve the entire process of the studio, and maybe the studio of design becomes core, and it gets to be informed by both the definitive and the interpretive fields. It's important that we introduce to students the research methods rather early, because the translation and application of those research methods are very critical to their understanding, and in many ways they are critical to the kind of inquiry that they make as part of their engagement with the design studio. And particularly, I would like to say that in the context of India, and from the perspective of the social integration, all the methodologies that are being used to engage with the people only comes through a system, an instrument of social engagement. And as far as we are able to address this requirement of social engagement, I think we are able to do justice with the entire system. Now, this is a continuous process which has been structured for all the stages, and this certainly advocates the professional training at the 4th year level, which is almost at the 8th semester, where the student also gets exposed to the professional issues and absorbs the professional approach of dealing with projects, and comes back to the institution with a more informed position on the entire thing. Now, in terms of the implementation of the TQM model, I think we need to have a faculty performance index, which brings in accountability in the system. The teaching loads of the faculty needs to be balanced with the expectation for research and their own professional growth. And I think the minimum standards and the council also recommend the faculty to be involved in active professional practice. And I think this is something very critical. I mean, the engagement with profession translates into some very effective delivery in the studios. Development of teaching material in the schools of architecture is very important. I think the repository of teaching material is to be created, and now we have the e-resources for disseminating this information appropriately. We need to have the appropriate assessment and evaluation criteria, the relevant curriculum with time, establishment of quality parameters by each institution as to what they would like to ensure as part of their continuous improvement process. A quality audit to be conducted. Many universities have begun to do a quality audit as part of the academic audit committees that they send to various institutions. And the mechanism to evaluate quality should be very discreet, and it has to be very objective. The emphasis should certainly be on teamwork and documentation, which certainly I think is missing in architectural education, and with focus on institutional exchange programs and joint programs within the country and outside the country. So I think this becomes critical to our engagement of achieving quality. And now going down to the entire roadmap to achieve this, we need to first do a SWOT analysis of the current status, and then we go down to the kind of commitment that we see in the institution, and we need to define our vision through the values and principles that we have identified, which translates into 5 S's. These almost get defined through the assimilation of 5 aspects, is that how you sort out the issues, how do you systematize it, sanitize areas where required, standardize it, and then achieve all this through self-discipline. So the implementation of these 5 S's become very critical by virtue of the way top management set education, the vision statement drawn, and then the decision-making issues which are being concerned, the long-term action plans which are being drawn based on the values and principles that the institution wants to pursue, setting up of the right goals, building up right teams within the institution, a endeavor towards continuous learning, and then the critical success factors are being identified, which becomes instruments and mechanisms for continuous improvement processes. Now, it is important that when we are talking about quality, we have to benchmark it. Now, benchmarking is an important tool which is critical to evaluation of educational processes. And I think this also is connected to the accreditation process that I was talking earlier. Now, to do any investment into education or undertake investment in education, I think we need to be looking at the process benchmarking in the areas of higher education, and which probably will be looking at the improvement processes by the kind of comparisons that are being undertaken. Camp, in his theory of benchmarking in 1989, has classified benchmarking into some 5 areas: internal benchmarking, competitive benchmarking, functional and industry benchmarking, the generic process or best-in-class benchmarking, and each benchmarking can be an important process analysis for improvement. So it's a very process-oriented tool that I'm talking about, which needs to be practiced in case we are looking at quality as an outcome. Now, these are different kinds of benchmarks which we have been able to qualify for different levels, which starts with, again, I'm re-emphasizing on the issue of philosophy, vision, the dynamic process which absorbs change, the emphasis on design thinking, and structured curricula, pedagogy, and continuous audit of the program. The second benchmark at the which is critical at the first year level is how a student is able to communicate verbally, graphically, using different mediums with basic design knowledge and skill sets. The emphasis on ideation and concept development through design thinking approach, understanding of both manual and automatic skills, and then to ensure holistic growth of any student, we have to encourage several extramural activities. Now, at this end of the second year, the benchmark would be to focus on the creation and application of knowledge embedded in the socio-cultural values of our country, the right kind of skill set, both hard and soft skills, emphasis of utilization of technical vocabulary, sensitization towards architectural issues through integration of both these definitive and interpretive fields at that stage, appreciation of context and methodology to engage with the physical environment. I think this contextual way to deal with the with design, I think, and the approach to deal with the context should become very integral, and it should be brought very early in our learning stages. The third year benchmark is very critical to applying the knowledge of previous years to the current design studio. Now, the dimension of integrated studio that I have been talking is that every year, preceding year, informs the application to be reinforced in the subsequent year. That means whatever was being taught in the first year gets reinforced in the second year, and it's applied. That means we are continuously engaging in application of the knowledge being imparted and ensure that the student firms up his knowledge base and is being able to apply the right kind of tools. And some of those evaluations and validation can also come through the right use of the application software and simulation techniques, which translates into the right kind of conviction for the student. As we grow to the fourth year, I think the understanding of the advanced technologies and its application to design, the focus on the contextual approach to design, integration of the codal provisions of building construction and to the professional requirements, they all need to be brought in at this stage so that he is good to take the professional training and is able to absorb far better when he goes for professional training in the semester. In the 9th and 10th semester, I think we should be exposed to the larger issues of urban design, urban planning, the issues of other aspects of architectural design, which includes issues of parametricism, the issues of climatic evaluation, the issues of selection of advanced construction technologies, advanced structural systems, and so on and so forth. And all this is again rooted in the aspects of design thinking, which is critical to the development process. Coming to the last segment of this presentation is the final quality pyramid that we are talking about, where we have these progressive benchmarks on the y-axis, and the axis has the critical quality drivers, where we have the three critical components of the pyramid, which includes the student and the faculty, which forms the base for the entire educational process, culminating into the institutional outcomes and the institutional's achievement at the end of the process. So the perception of skill development and motivation to pursue discipline with passion is the key outcome at the first level, which should translate into understanding and appreciation of settlements, vernacular architecture, articulation of space, form, and function. Third year, with all these 2 years, should culminate into building as a building. That means comprehensive integration of program with building systems and technology and utilization of application softwares. The fourth year, or the next level, should be integrating theory into practice, which should also be dovetailed into the right kind of research inquiries. And subsequently, it should then graduate to urbanism and urban systems, and finally translating into a absolutely culminating learning process demonstrated through the thesis that we have in the final year. So all the program outcomes would be looking into the ability of the students to grow holistically, apply knowledge adequately, communicate with conviction, to be able to work on multidisciplinary teams, and to own the professional and ethical responsibility as they take on to the profession. So finally, I would like to leave you with this thought of the key summary of what I have talked about, and we'll be happy to take questions from here on if you have any. This was, I'm sure, it was a different kind of a discourse and the kind of discussion that I'm having with you. It's not for the conventional one where you look at a lot of drawings and things like that, but probably I thought that I would trigger some kind of introspection through this presentation. So, and probably this is, we need to look at something like this if we really need to look at the implementation of NEP, if it has to be achieved and the desired success has to be anticipated. Thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing from here.
I've got hang. Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. I think it was very informative, and we got a very overwhelming response as a lot of participants were asking questions.
Okay.
So I would be reading questions for you.
Right.
So the first question has been asked by Madhuri Agarwal, and the person is asking, what is best collaboration, interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, plus locally or globally? How we can enhance global collaboration in this COVID era? This is her first question. Yeah.
Okay, so I think collaboration in any form is welcome, and in whichever way it undertakes that collaboration, which is focused towards enhancing the base of knowledge, adding value to the knowledge, and creating the right kind of an environment where this information exchange and knowledge exchange happens, I think is the essence of the right collaboration. And we have to engage with into different collaborative platforms. Of course, in the COVID times, we know that we are talking today through this online platform, and the gap of distance and time has all been bridged. So I think it is the right kind of inquiry that we undertake, the right kind of collaborations that we are seeking, I think is more important. Definition of the kind of the collaborative inputs that we are seeking, and the definition of that, I think, is more paramount to get the right kind of outcomes from the collaborative processes. I hope this satisfies Madhuri in some way.
I think quite certainly, sir. There is another question from her again. I'm going to read that out. Should degree highest one faculties having should be criteria for selection or their experience way to deliver in studios?
Okay. You see, there is always a
I think you
value.
can read the question from the Q&A, sir.
Okay. I'll go through the Q&A parallelly.
Yes,
Right.
sir. Because yeah.
Fine. So
Thank you,
it's
sir.
a very interesting question where we are looking only at degree as an instrument of somebody's knowledge or as instrument of his evaluation. However, we recognize the fact that any education engagement or educational engagement value adds every individual because if you look at the progression from the undergraduate level to the master's level and then subsequently to the doctoral programs, I think each value adds to the base of knowledge and also in terms of the methodology in which the education is being pursued. So I think to that extent, this engagement becomes very, very critical because if we look into this progression, of course, now there has been a paradigm shift in the way we are looking at undergraduate teaching, which to best of my understanding should always be dovetailed around research and research-based inquiry. But graduating to the highest level of doctoral programs, as we know, that any research for that matter is a very sequential, systematic inquiry into any area of concern. And therefore, but that does not mean that we can discount the knowledge which is gained through experience. I think a lot of experience, particularly in the field of architecture, comes from the ground and the way you engage with the ground realities and you deliver in the profession. So I think what is required as of now is a balanced mix of both theory and practice. And I would strongly suggest and recommend that every studio team should have a blend of people from the profession, and it should be almost at a level of 50% full-time faculty and 50% visiting faculty or people from the profession. And I'm sharing with you with this experience, maybe because of the paucity of resources that we always had at School of Planning and Architecture. I think the success of the program at SPA always has been that there was a fantastic mix of people from the theory and practice. So we had a blend until the practice was banned in the government institutions. But earlier, the full-time faculty was also practicing, and they also brought on plate a lot of practical issues. But then they were always reinforced by the people from hardcore profession. So there was a very interesting blend of theory and practice, and they had both something to offer. And therefore, it becomes very, very critical that this blending of a profession or interaction with the profession, particularly for architecture, is very, very critical. And I am sure that the equalization committees do take cognizance, but then the equalization principles for experience vis-a-vis qualification will have to be done in a very, very pragmatic manner. Because the fact remains, since I can share this, I had been both as part two of academics and profession parallelly. So I think there is a lot of background work if it is taken in the right earnest in the profession, and to deliver a project demands a tremendous and rigorous engagement with the project from the conception to its delivery and successful delivery to the satisfaction of the client. So there is a great learning. And I think there is no way that experience of an individual can be discounted. But the equalization system has to be very, very rational and objective. That's my view on this.
I think we'll
Can
agree
we
with you,
go
sir.
to the next one?
Yes, sir. So I'll read it out for you. There is a question from Suparna. She's asking, please elaborate on the proposal of converting undergrad architectural education from 5-year course to 3-year BSc degree. Will it dilute the importance and stature of architectural profession? And there is a continual question which says, can the duration of the 5-year degree be brought down to 4 years?
Okay. Interesting question. This has been a long debate, and I think we follow different models globally. There have been a 4+1 model, 5+2 model. This is the 5+2 model that we follow in India, but now it is 3+2+2. So 3 is the first 3 years, which also offers reasonable exit policy. Now, this is an interesting thing which has now been brought in, and of course, it was brought in by many schools much earlier. The fact is that many students, as of now, are not quite aligned to the discipline, and somehow they continue to struggle with the discipline which they are not aligned to. And this may be as a consequence of various issues of the current stature of the profession. It is also connected to the opportunities that a particular profession offers. It also talks about the issue of the kind of monetary benefits that one gets at the end of the program, and one equates it to his other peer group. Now these are concerns which certainly are very valid, but at the same time, in case he's not aligned to the profession, then he gets a early exit without loss of any time. That means the exit at 3 years allows you to, which is considered at par with any bachelor's degree. That means BA or BSc. But then you can charter your own path, and you can go into any creative discipline, or you may even go to any other discipline if it is of your particular choice. So you don't need to be stuck with the discipline which you are not putting your heart and soul into. So from that standpoint, yes, it becomes is very interesting. And from a professional perspective, it is even critical that we get more dedicated people in profession. That means the ones who are not aligned to it have an option to exit at the 3rd year level, and then can pursue and charter his own path and his own career pathway the way he or she is more aligned. And yet the people who graduate to the upper levels will always be more dedicated to the profession. Now, if I talk to you about the international standard and global scenarios, I think Slovakia is one country where the training has been kept for 2 years. And slowly and slowly, we are also moving towards that model, that to ensure quality professional delivery, the people will have to undertake some kind of a certification, which is a standard trend in the West, that everybody is not into practice. You see, the number of graduating students in different countries, some only restrict themselves to ideation. And this is a very popular concept in the United States. And they only work on ideation for various projects. Then there is another set of architects who would never like to practice, but they will always work for a firm. And they become a very important component of that firm. And then there is one segment of architects who want to undertake profession and pursue it as a principal of a firm. And they then undertake those kinds of certification exams. And those who qualify those certification exams only practice architecture as a practice, so to say. But then the law and the legislation is very stringent on the delivery systems. And that's why they achieve quality in each project that they undertake. I mean, to be honest, that chalta hai approach doesn't work there. Everything is accountable. And that's what is critical. And that's also being inbuilt in the entire system and process that they follow. So from that standpoint, I think the different approaches and this option of exit, I think at 3rd year is very critical. But as I said earlier, if the baseline courses are structured where at the end of 3rd year, building ends as a building, that means you have a strong takeaway from that level, and then you are graduating to the bigger issues, which are more architectural or urban in nature, and housing, or maybe other critical issues of architectural design and urbanism, which then become critical to us, which are important. So from that standpoint, I think the structure that I have just mentioned and I referred to gives you a reasonable knowledge base, and it has been benchmarked to a level of your exit, which makes your education relevant and holistic up to that point in time. And then when you move on to the next stage, it is a progression which takes you forward to the stages above.
Well said,
Right?
sir. Yes, sir. There is another question being asked by Omkar Kulkarni. The
Yeah.
person is saying how far social, cultural, economical backgrounds of student, prospective architects contribute employability of individual. Please share your thoughts in differential backgrounds of students' domain.
Okay, it's an interesting thing. I think India has been uh, experiencing this, and I think from that standpoint, various policies of Government of India were being laid out to ensure that people from humble backgrounds are also not left out. And I think we have umpteen examples where people from the humble backgrounds have excelled in all disciplines, so to say, and they have their own story to tell. I think I can't say less than giving an example of that famous teacher from Bihar known as Anand Sir, who took upon him and ensured that people from humble backgrounds could reach IITs. And some of those have done exceedingly well on the international platform. So, to put it together, I think the intellect of an individual cannot be analyzed or gauged by his background. It is the opportunities that are available to him that are the limitations. And I think we need to overcome those limitations. Of course, now the government, which always is looking towards the welfare of its citizen as a welfare state, the opportunities have been created for students from economically backward section to be able to access higher education. And it's important that I think some of these have really had a great impact when we had about 7% of gross enrollment ratio in 2008, and now it has reached about 22% within a span of 13 years. That the by 90 year 2020, the gross enrollment ratio of the Indian universities in higher education is 23%. So there's a quantum jump from 2008 to 2020, and the government is targeting about 50% gross enrollment ratio by the year 2050. So I'm sure the opportunities are being made available. We have to ensure that the opportunities are extended to people from all humble backgrounds. Uh, as in the West, there are examples where the alumni contribute tremendously as part of endowment funds to these institutions. And I think institutions and the alumni of the institutions can play a great role in supporting such institutions, such students from humble backgrounds, so that they get the right kind of opportunities for their growth. And the faculty should ensure that their humble backgrounds are not a limitation for their intellectual growth and their professional delivery. And I'm sure anybody who is aligned to take the profession or his education seriously and value the education. The fact is the difference between education in India and education abroad is that students earn their education. And here they don't value the parental support that they have, or maybe to a certain extent the governmental support that they have in their process of growth and education. So their students have to they work and they earn and they pursue their education, and therefore they take much longer as compared to Indian students. And therefore this three plus two plus two or 4+1+1, all those systems are meaningless for them. I think they are numbers in many ways. And so from that standpoint, yes, it is critical, but the system will have to be structured in some way, and different philosophies have been used across the globe to impart this education. But system has to be an enabler. I think we need to get people and create opportunities for them for their professional growth, intellectual growth. And this is again embedded in the principles of both economic sustainability and social sustainability. Mr. Omkar, if this answered your query, but I think it's a very particular, pertinent issue that we need to address. And this is relevant to the Indian context particularly.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I would like to take another question. It's a question from Mushaffar Ali, who wants to know how Architecture Institute deal in context to social demand with prioritized challenges and critical success factors for delivering quality architecture education in India. Please suggest some optimized parameters to achieve long-term educational quality in architecture education.
Okay, so Mr. Muzaffar, I think if I'm talking specifically to the Indian context now and architectural education in India. You see, for countries which have got a huge demographic dividend, the engagement with the people is paramount. And the way and the manner in which we engage with people, I think that becomes the most important aspect of our of delivery. I think the understanding and the fundamentals of architectural profession is that we are actually designing for the people, and we are not supposed to be organizing things to our to service our needs, or maybe our aesthetic needs. I think ultimately when I said that we have to have a paradigm shift from critical thinking approach to the design thinking approach, I think this is what matters. That the first dimension of a design thinking approach is that we need to empathize with the user. You are actually designing for the people. You're not designing for your own self. And if you're designing for the people, then you need to empathize with the needs of the user. And I think understanding and a critical appraisal of his needs, which probably translates and manifests into the physical environment, I think is our role. And how we analyze that, and we can foot the bill, and sometimes we brainstorm to achieve those. So any kind of success to that effect can only be achieved through the principles of social engineering in India. If we engage with the principles of social engineering, I think we will be able to do justice to the way we deal with the cross section of our society, with different kinds of backgrounds, different kinds of regional diversities, and the key issues that confronts the nation as a whole. And in many ways, when I say relevant curriculum, the relevant curriculum has to be aligned to the national thrust areas. They have to be aligned to the needs of the country. And today, I mean, I can just give you an example that we have received an advisory from the Council of Architecture, and which is coming from the Government of India, that architectural institutions need to invest into problem-solving exercises which are connected to the agro industries. That means if a country which has about 70% of people which are engaged in agriculture as a profession, I think we have not done sufficiently for their well-being, for their resource. And if this is the hallmark of our sustenance in an agrarian economy, then what is the contribution that we have made for them, which is both connected to their occupation, for their livelihood, and this kind of unrest that we are seeing these days is all connected to those. I mean, the issue of an economies of scale prevent us to graduate to those levels. And this is the limiting factor. I mean, we have been complaining about environmental pollution and the stubble burning problem. But the problem is that the farmer does not have the wherewithal to invest into the systems for these. So there are a couple of factors which have to be looked into, and I think the education has to be made more relevant, and we have to be more sensitive to the needs of the people at large. And now, if we are looking at the parameters that you are talking about, I think the parameters always lie and they emanate from the dimensions that I mentioned for the total quality pathway, which starts from the admission process to the growth of the faculty, students, pedagogical initiatives, and ultimately the kind of interaction that we have with the profession, and to be standardizing and internationalizing the process as a whole. That means equity in the process will have to be made available. However, I don't mean to say that everything has to be structured very rigidly. It has to be flexible. It has to address to the needs of the region and the diversity that we are wanting to look at. And probably, if we invest into a process, and a process which is accountable at all levels, I think that is the fundamental to achieving quality. And as I said earlier, continuous improvement. I think the attitude towards continuous improvement, to review the processes that we are involved with, and how we can improvise. And the learnings at each stage should inform the future growth. So I think it is within those and all those dimensions that there will be optimization tools which can be adequately provided for each one of them. And this is something which demands. I mean, there can be, again, as I said, there is a no one fit all solution. I think for each discipline, each subject, new set of paradigms will have to be drawn and to engage with the students contextually in different parts of the world. Is that right, Mr. Muzaffar? If this services the question.
I think you have elaborately explained the thing. Thank you so much, sir. Before handing over to Bipasha ma'am to formally thank you for the session, I just want to say it is always wonderful to listen to you. Great to have
No,
you
thank you
as
so much, and
one of the
it's a
panelists.
pleasure is
Thank you
mine,
so
and I'm
much.
sure it was a pleasure to engage with this such a wonderful audience, and I'm grateful to again to APJ Institute of Technology for creating this kind of a platform of knowledge exchange, and I wish that more such engagements happen in course of time, which will be critical to, I think, learning for all of us, and we learn from each other, and the profession at the end should win, and the objective should be that it should deliver to the profession at large. So thank you very
Thank you
much,
so much, sir.
Professor
And
Kumar
I
and
would like to,
Professor
please,
Sabarwal.
Bipasha ma'am,
Yeah,
can you take it
yeah,
over?
yeah, sure. Thank you so much for such a wonderful detailed discussion on the different parameters of architectural education to achieve the total quality of the architectural education. So I thank you once again, sir, for being with us, and definitely we'll try to have some more sessions with you and with the various people and the eminent speakers who could again further connect to us with different aspects of education. So thank you once again, and I thank all the participants for being there patient listening, as well as putting up the questions to the different speakers.